I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story, where I consult, teach, coach, and speak on the applied science and bewitchery of brand and business storytelling, so that you can clarify your story to amplify your impact and simplify your life.
I thought it was just a stupid picture of a pig in the ocean. But after hearing that story, I had to have it. Now I wasn't just buying a picture. I was buying a story. Story literally made the picture worth more money to me.
That's what businesses are about. People buy brands. People buy stories much more than anything else.
I work with a lot of big enterprise companies, but let's just say I always tell folks, drop the PowerPoint, close your laptops, start with your story.
If you want people to get engaged and you want people to act, you have to tell them an emotionally powerful story. That's with great characters, it's with uncertain outcomes, and it's with high stakes and drama.
All business strategy is a story.
Welcome to another edition of the Business of Story. Today, we are completely focused on the importance of creating your personal brand story. And the reason why this is, believe me, I know this from coming from a family of 7 kids, all born within 9 years, that I hate to tell you, but we're all numbers out there. We live in a land of abundant brands that can deliver the exact same things. And if you have been looking for a job lately, you know the feeling. There are abundant professionals that can do the same thing you can do, unless you differentiate yourself with a brand story, a personal brand story. And it does so much for you. It's more than just differentiates you in the marketplace. It gets you very focused and clear on who you are, what you're about, aligned with your beliefs and values, so that you can go and find the positions and the jobs where you can express the best you, that you don't have to give in to the will of the corporation and bend you to their will. It's about really understanding who you are, coming down to clarifying your personal brand story to amplify your impact and simplify your life. And today, I have a wonderful guest who has just gone through all this. And this is a person that isn't, just throwing a brand story together. This is a global communicator who has been in some of the toughest businesses in the world, in that it's the mining industry. And the mining industry, of course, gives us the goods that we need to make life happen. But there's also a lot of environmental degradation that goes on, social things that go on. And she has had to deal with this stuff around the world for the past 15 years. Her name is Jennifer Russo, and she was most recently the Global General Manager of Communications and Communities for Rio Tinto. And for full disclosure here, Jennifer was a wonderful client of ours at Park & Co. when I was running my agency back in the day. And we got to know each other, and we worked for many, many years together. And then we hadn't talked in a couple years because I was doing the Business of Story thing. And she called me a couple months ago. Getting caught up. And what she told me is it was time for her to leave Rio Tinto. She's raising 2 young boys here in Phoenix, and she wanted to stay a little bit closer to home, but she wanted to continue her amazing, stellar communications career and needed to find just the right organization to do that with. So we got to talking. And I quickly realized that Jennifer, despite all of her wonderful communication skills, had not clarified her own personal brand story. And it's not her fault. You may feel the same way too. Look at I got this doctor, Dr. Vo. He's fabulous. He's a dentist. And I guarantee you, Dr. Vo does not do his own root canals. He brings in somebody else to do that. So when I asked Jennifer, what is it you want to do? What is your brand story? She's like, oh my God, Park, I'm not sure that I know. So we had a chance to go through it. She did the story cycle system. She is now out there looking for that job, but is extraordinarily focused on it. And she took a little bit of time out of her job hunt to come and visit me here at the International Global Universal Studios of Business of Story to share her experience in finding her story, clarifying it so she can get out there and find just the right job for her. And in the process, she's going to tell you how she did it and how you can do it for yourself. Jennifer, welcome. to the business of story?
Park, thank you for that absolutely glamorous setup and introduction. It is an honor to be at world headquarters.
World, global, international, intergalactic.
Exactly.
It's great to have you here. It was so much fun working with you as a client. Here we are sitting across the same table from each other, but now it's like, all right, I'm sort of like career coach in some ways, just helping you get your story straight. But you've done that, and it is so much fun with what you've done, how you've created it, and I'm really curious to hear what's the feedback you're getting out there.
Yeah, Park, it has been an absolutely incredible experience. I think you hit the nail on the head in your introduction. I really have spent so much of my career helping multinational organizations define their brand position. What do they stand for? What are they about? And as I was getting ready to catapult into phase 2 of my career, I realized I was playing roulette. I was playing career roulette, had not defined my brand position. And the response has been absolutely fantastic. Park, as you know, we went through the story, using the story workbook that you created, that proprietary workbook, and answering questions about my values, what makes me tick, what drives me, what lights me up, where I can add value for others, and where there can be a match in terms of culture and dynamic. We landed on what I think is an incredibly powerful position
and
for
let's
me.
Hold on that for a second, because I want to build to that. Now, let's go back to that phone call, because it was so interesting to me when the call came in, and it was a basic networking call. How did it go down for you?
It was a powerful moment of self-reflection, Park, because I called you, and you're absolutely right. As you do when you're starting to go out and look at where you're going to take your career, you call people that you are in the know. And the discussion was really caused a lot of introspection, because you asked me some incredibly powerful questions about what I stood for, what was my unique narrative. And I wasn't able to answer that succinctly.
And you're not alone in that. By the way, we all go through that. So it was fun, because I remember after that call, you said, okay, what do we do next? And I said, well, get the workbook and let's work out your story. And I always like to begin, and I asked you this then once we sat down, is stop looking for your story and start finding your scenes, those moments that have shaped who you are today. And so often is the case, it is typically something that happened to us in the past when we were kids. So we explored that. You grew up on Long Island, and a really fun, interesting life growing up there, an academic for a father. Would you mind sharing a moment or two that you shared with me growing up that has informed who you are today as the communicator you are?
Absolutely, Park. I grew up on Long Island. My father was superintendent of the largest school district. He was a progressive educator, and there were many moments that shaped me, including my relentless passion for learning. And probably one of the most significant was I remember coming home from school with all but straight A's. And my father said to me, and expecting, as you do when you're looking for that acknowledgement, expecting him to, give me that sort of virtual trophy. And he looked at me and he said, well, do you understand why you got a B and what you got wrong? And, this could be devastating when you're young, but it really shaped me, Park, because what he instilled in me is that we have to learn from our collective mistakes. We can build on what we know, but it's that opportunity to learn. And I've applied that throughout my life, including in my career, because that is when we do the most learning and growing.
And I remember, too, when you and I were talking, that I asked you when the last time was you had thought about and or shared that story.
Yes.
And you said you hadn't.
I had not. I had not shared it. And as you know, Park, I have a reputation for being a relentless learner, right? I am completing now my second Master's of Science in Development Management, which is really got a strong focus on corporate social responsibility, and education is at the heart of my dissertation. And it is something I put into practice in my workplace and at home, quite frankly, raising 2 young boys.
All right. So you shared one scene with us that starts, informing who you are today, and your story starts coming together. Do you have another one? Maybe you were in high school or college or something that you can look back on and said, this had a big impact of who I am as a communicator today.
I think, Parkin, we're going to talk about my story as it relates to my passion around diversity. And what I can tell you is having the good fortune of growing up in New York and having extraordinary exposure to culture. And I remember as a kid, we would take field trips from Long Island into the city. And I was probably about maybe, 11. And, we were on this bus and you're stuck in the traffic in the Midtown Tunnel. And, you want to go home. And at the time play, I think it was Nintendo Mario Brothers, akin to the kids going home and playing Fortnite. And I remember they took us to see Cats, and they took us to, some of the most famous stores and locations, and Park, that exposure to what you can learn. It made me realize that I was destined to fall in love with, as the John Green quote goes, places I'd never been to and people I'd never met. And so it has really influenced me in terms of seeking out, a diversity of people for their views and their life experiences and their thoughts.
Well, and you can't get more diverse than growing up and moving from Long Island to Phoenix, Arizona, and going to school out here. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, Park, the truth is I was deeply passionate about journalism all my life. In my household on Sundays, we watched football all day and we waited with bated breath for 60 Minutes to come on. The most prolific storytellers of all time are those newscasters. And that was Sunday evening in my house. And I fell madly, deeply in love with journalism. And I was looking for a place to pursue that and maybe get a little bit of sunshine in my life. And so I came out to the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, and ASU was then, as it is now, a melting pot. I had roommates from all over the world, and friends from all over the world, and it was just incredible.
So you graduated from there. You had a few jobs like we do in our 20s, and then you went to work for Rio Tinto, and that was about 15 years ago or so. Was that here in town, I guess? You were working with a local operation?
I was, Park. For your listeners, mining is a very capital-intensive project. And
is Rio Tinto like the second largest mining operation?
They are.
In the world?
In the world, in terms of their market cap. They're present on nearly every continent except the one you can't really access because it's just too darn cold and remote. So they are. And I started my career in oil and gas, and, getting into the extractive business, it kind of gets into your blood. The opportunity to work on really complex issues that involve a multitude of stakeholders, there's nothing like it.
So were you always in communications, or was it something that you graduated into at Rio Tinto? Because when we first started working together, which was what, 2000
we were just young pups, Park.
5?
Yeah.
Something like that? I know it was a few years before the big recession hit.
Yeah, I was. So, I graduated with a degree in journalism and a minor in Spanish, and I wanted to put those two things to work. And so when my first opportunity in oil and gas, I was able to do that doing employee communications in the Four Corners where there was a diverse population that was bilingual. And I had the opportunity to climb a cat cracker and work in a gas station and get real exposure to that business and, meet the people on the front line that make things happen, and hear their stories and retell them. Mm-hmm. And that just, I took that with me. And that carried over.
We started working together then with Resolution Copper,
yes,
a big mining enterprise up in Superior, Arizona, and you took over the overall communications for that, and we're heading that up. We were helping you with some branding and some outreach there.
You sure were. It was such an exciting time, Park, because we were actually, and your firm played such a critical role because we were really establishing our brand presence in this market. We were an unknown, and Rio Tinto was largely an unknown. And so it was, establishing our key messages and then the proof points behind those key messages. What were we going to stand for as we entered this market as an international company? And you may recall, Park, we had some legislation that we had to move in order to secure some lands and telling those stories about the economic, social, and environmental impacts, the good ones that a project like this can have. Because there's a view that mining it can only cause harm, and the reality is there's a lot of good that can be done when mining is done right.
Was that hard for you to bring those two worlds together because, in any extractive service industry, you are always going to be, thrown on the chopping block for you're destroying the environment and you're hurting people and indigenous populations. And gosh knows that we dealt with all of that out in Superior. How do you balance that with then actually the good that Rio Tinto was and does do in the world and through, what Resolution Copper was doing out in Superior?
Yeah, I think a couple things on that, Park. I think gone are the Milton Friedman days where the view is that the social responsibility of a company is to maximize profits. So we certainly didn't enter the market with that view. The challenge is you can't pay lip service to corporate social responsibility. And so for me, it was establishing programs like in the education space, identifying environmental partners that we could work with on things like bird monitoring and rehabilitating lands that had been damaged from prior operations, and really putting our money where our mouth is. That was critical. But it's also about being honest and acknowledging the legacy and the boom and bust cycle. And so how are we going to come in, for example, and help? We are the ones that know what the labor requirements are going to be. And how are we going to make sure that we could upskill so that we weren't importing labor and setting the community up for that same boom and bust cycle it has experienced many times? You have to acknowledge the legacy in order to move forward.
Now, Superior is a very rural community northeast of Phoenix, and more east than northeast, I guess. What were some of the things that you came across out there when trying to work with that community? And maybe even you tripped over yourself a little bit.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I certainly tripped and fell, got a few bruises, got back up again, dusted myself off. Well, I think I didn't understand necessarily the dynamic of the community. It is a community of incredibly passionate people. It is an under-resourced community. It is the same 10 people that do almost everything in terms of advocacy and development. And I remember going in, I'm deeply passionate about education. We had identified this program that would enhance STEM education, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics skills for the elementary students. And that's, of course, a significant business goal for us if we want to be able to hire locally to upskill. And I was so enthusiastic, and I met with the principal and I met with the staff and I said, I'm so excited. I've secured the money and I've got the program through this nonprofit organization, and here you go. They're going to come deliver it, and all your teachers have to do is teach to it, and the kids have to go home and every night and get these workbooks signed off, and they're going to get, prizes, and hopefully we're going to see an increase in test scores. And of course, I didn't understand at the time the complexity of kind of the donor, which is the multinational, and beneficiary relationship. And I didn't listen and understand the dynamics of the challenges they faced and what they needed. And that wasn't what they needed. And doing a one-off program isn't sustainable in a rural community, just like it typically isn't in an urban community, but even more so. So the truth is we had to retract the program after a year.
And what did they need?
And what they needed, Park, was professional development for teachers, and they needed support for their athletic program, which is at the heart of their community and encourages kids to stay in school and perform given the academic standards required. And they needed online access to classes because a lot of these kids, there is challenging home situations. And they needed a multi-year agreement with us that didn't make them feel like every year they had to report against metrics and systems of evaluation that were unsustainable. And I'm so happy about where the partnership landed. But it's I think what you call on the job learning, not much different than parenting.
So you were doing such a good job out there in Superior. We saw you in action, and certainly Rio Tinto saw you in action, that then you continued to move up the food chain at Rio Tinto.
Yes.
So you started doing this around the world for the organization. Can you take us to one of the craziest places you've been in the world where you're trying to understand these people and how you can actually help them?
Oh, goodness. Absolutely. Park, I have had the incredible opportunity to travel the world and meet people. And let me just say the one universal thing I see everywhere I go and what people want, they want hope. And mining companies can bring that in the form of jobs and economic development and through social investment. And I just, I have been to the remote parts of Yellowknife, Canada, and to the far-flung parts of Peru. And I have seen protests, and I have seen people, chain themselves to things, and I have seen it all. But it is all spurred by passion and hope and a desire to get something better for themselves, their communities, their families.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever feel like you were in an industry that wasn't quite right for you for what you want to do? That you had to maybe do too much reconciling to get some of this stuff put through?
Yeah, Park, I think that the industry has learned a lot. Is it the most progressive? There's still opportunity, I think, there for the industry to learn, because it is something that's very market driven, and it's price driven. And when you have to, report quarterly to shareholders, there's a different kind of pressure in that. I think that they have done tremendous work on their values and their vision. But where I go next, I'm looking for somebody that's really mission driven, and that's kind of in their DNA.
Yeah. Now, when I was working with you, I didn't realize just how focused you were and are now on diversity and inclusiveness.
Yeah.
And looking back, I can see, well, that's what she did practice all the time, in addition to a lot of your other tasks at, corporate communications and so forth. So the reasons why I was digging so deep, pardon the pun, in your mining background is, how has that informed you to who you are today now, and the communicator looking, to help and work and tap in or mine the gold in diversity and inclusion inside a large multinational organization?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we could just have an hour of puns. I mean, Park, you're spot on. And I think, we can call it mining the gold, copper, diamonds. I did it all.
The rare resources.
Which people are rare resources, Park. And it informed me greatly. I led teams of diverse backgrounds on multiple continents, and they bring with them a diversity of thought and beliefs and experiences. And I quickly realized, all companies talk about people being their best assets. And the thing is, Park, that's not true.
People are not their best assets?
What is really the asset here is the diversity of thought and perspective and beliefs and experiences. And if you learn
those people bring
that
to
they
an
bring to the organization. And I had the opportunity to experience that firsthand, not only in terms of backgrounds, but also education and training. Technical people think differently than creative people, right? We know the cliches about right and left brain thinkers, but bringing them together, really helped me. I was able to catalyze that. And we had a team that outperformed. We constantly outperformed in terms of whether it was our impact in communities, the awareness that we helped raise of an initiative, the media that we helped secure for events like a diamond tender, because we collectively were able to identify those stories underneath the obvious, right? So, for example, Park, when you have a diamond tender as we do, there's pretty stones. But the real story that we were able to dig up, if you will, when I got the teams together, was about the sustainability of those diamonds and their history from traditional lands in Australia, and the rarity of the people and their stories, and how we have preserved that, and how we have remained committed to our supply chain and to doing the right thing. And those stories only come out when you know how to catalyze people to get them to share those stories in an impactful way and empower the people in your teams.
Yeah. And folks, why we're exploring this and I'm asking all these questions is now we're going to jump into Jennifer's brand story, her personal brand story. And I thought it was important for you to really understand her background, because even in my conversation with someone I've known for quite a while, I learned so much more about her. And what happened is that we all get caught in this generalized corporate speak of talking about who we are and what we stand for and the kinds of jobs and opportunities we want. But hopefully you see, here we go again, when you drill down and start unearthing, excavating. I don't mean it just seems to be working.
It's working.
The scenes, the moments that you have had the biggest impact that have drive your passion and your curiosity. So when you open up the workbook, we start going through the story cycle system. The very first chapter is to understand what is your number one position in the marketplace, meaning what do you do different and therefore better than your competition? So in all this conversation, going through the workbook, what did you arrive at then as your number one position in the marketplace?
Yeah. Simply put, Park, it is, and it builds on this theme of energy, that I am truly the kinetic communicator that can catalyze the untapped energy and collective diversity in a team to help them outperform.
That's it.
That is it.
And I mean, in that is even a unique value proposition. Now, this term kinetic communicator, I love, especially for you, Jennifer, because of then the one thing that you have not talked about in your personal background is your energy level, your fitness,
yes,
the biking you do with your kids and so forth. But it plays right in hand with what you do in the business world every day. And you bring a unique energy to every single project and relationship that I've never seen in someone before. And so in working through your story, we arrived at this kinetic communicator, and that is your hook. That is who you are.
Absolutely. And Park, I absolutely appreciate that. And I believe it. I believe that energy begets energy, and being able to catalyze people and empower them, has paid significant dividends, personally and professionally.
And when you're rolling this idea of Jennifer, the kinetic communicator, out to people that know you and to headhunters that are talking to you and so forth, what kind of reaction are you getting?
Oh, they absolutely love it. They love what it's about. They love what it stands for. Because as you said, in terms of buzzwords too, D&I, diversity and inclusion, is also becoming a big buzzword. I'd put it up there with social impact and some other phrases that you hear flung about. But the fact that we were able to put meat on it and talk about what I could do with that diversity and inclusion that was uniquely mine, or is uniquely mine, has really stood out.
Yeah. And I've never really heard anyone describe themselves as a kinetic communicator.
No.
They're bringing, from the energy industry, energy business, and the energy you bring to every business, I thought, just worked out beautifully for you. And then as we were working on your story, other things started to materialize. Here I go again. But like this idea of, and you had said once, as we were chatting through this, that, you hear that people are always the number one asset. And you and I explored that a little bit deeper. And that's when we arrived at that idea of what you had said earlier. They're not actually the number one asset. The number one asset is what they bring into the workforce. And it's really the first time I've heard somebody from a communication side in particular challenge that notion of saying, no, actually, I think you have it wrong. Your people are not your number one asset. It's the diversity that they represent in your organization. It is. And then that is your job to help connect those people, in a very inclusive way, to take advantage, for lack of a better term, or to build on that diversity of thinking, of experience, of insights, of points of view, to help a company outperform not only internally, but externally. And when you do that, what happens is you help those people, those number one assets that everybody else views them, get what they want out of life. So you can actually be even more empowering if you're viewing the diversity of that group as the number one asset versus just the individual as the number one asset.
Park, absolutely. And the other point I'll make about this, the other big kind of buzzword in the corporate world today is collaboration, right? But if you've been inside a corporation, collaboration means consensus ultimately towards my view. Mm-hmm. But if you embrace this philosophy of being a kinetic communicator that can catalyze the diversity and inclusion of people, it's contrary to what we mean when we talk about collaboration. It is hearing and listening and embracing, and not looking to drive people towards a particular outcome. It is letting that outcome naturally emerge. And the results are phenomenal because people are empowered and they want to deliver. They want to do right by the organization.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I like that came out of this was this idea of collective diversity, that those two words coming together don't seem like they work until you think of how they work together. So you have this collective of this complete diverse thought. And the more an organization can really bring that together, the more everybody benefits from them. And you've been able to do that in a lot of different ways throughout your life in the different jobs that you've had.
Absolutely. And, again, going back to the mining business, there are some people you wouldn't think are natural allies, like non-governmental organizations, environmental groups. But if you get together around a round table and talk it through and listen openly, you'd be amazed at where there are shared values and that people want to do the right thing. They want to do good. Mm-hmm. And they want to believe that you want to do good. But it's this notion, Park, also that we talked about, that this mindset allows me to go into meetings with people that might be seen as adversarial or colleagues that might be seen as having a different way of thinking with an abundance mindset. We live in a world where there's a view of scarcity. There's not enough. There's not enough dollars. There's not enough resources. Everybody's got to be lean and mean. But the great thing about thinking and listening is it's free. Mm-hmm. And there's plenty of room for that. And so some of the projects that we were able to deliver and the value and the way we're able to include groups that might have been not obvious.
You have an example?
Partners. Yeah. So I'm thinking about Park when I was working in the early days on resolution, and mining companies own a lot of land. That's not an atypical thing. And we owned a beautiful piece of land. You might remember that I think shot some photos down there along the lower San Pedro River. Mm-hmm. And we started working with an NGO to help us. The land really needed to be cleaned up. It had become kind of a dumping ground, unfortunately, a public dumping ground. The lands needed care and maintenance. And when we started talking to a prominent NGO, they said, yeah, we want to step in and do that and take care of that land. And then it led to opportunities for employees to go down there and do cleanup. And everybody knows the power of employee involvement and engagement. But it was through that brokering of that relationship with a group that people initially would have said, oh, gee, I think they don't like mining. They're never going to take a stance in our favor. But that wasn't what it was about. It was about listening and getting their views and seeing where we could partner. Mm-hmm. And that partnership is still going strong.
Now, last week on our show, we had another amazing CEO, professional, Aveen Tafoya, from CEO of Adelante Healthcare, and she has had to put up a lot as an immigrant from Iraq here, and she got her medical. She was a family practice doctor for a while and CEO of this amazing organization, and she talked just like you did about finding common ground in inclusivity and diversity. And I'm going to ask you the same question I asked her that you could listen to her interview last week. Is, do you have an antagonistic bone in your body? And the reason why I ask that is you are high energy. Yeah. I've seen you in really high stressful crisis communication situation, but I've never seen you lose it or come unravel. Yeah. And I've only heard you talk about building common ground among people. Have you lost it?
Park, when I have to say something to my boys for the 10th time, maybe. In a professional setting, no, because I just, maybe I'm just glass completely full. I believe very much that.
Why is that going off? I'm sorry about that.
That's all right. Very much that there is. These are always opportunities. I just see these situations as opportunities for me to grow, to learn, and to be surprised.
And what did you recommend, or how did you get your colleagues to take that same approach? Because again, a very high-powered, industry that you're working in that comes under fire all the time. What would be your recommendation, and how does it play out in you as a kinetic communicator to help people to take that deep breath and find that common ground when you're dealing with polarized communities?
Yeah, it's very much about talking, as I have done, about let's take a deep breath. Let's look maybe not at this so much as what are the risks, but what are the emerging opportunities? Where could we really shift the needle here and do something unexpected? It's getting people to take a step back and look at things in a different way. Is this an opportunity to build institutional sustainability? Is this an opportunity to further our brand reputation by doing something different? Because otherwise it's the cliche. If you want to get the same results and you want people to feel the same way about an industry like mining, you just keep doing the same thing, which is not countering the claims and not taking any chances.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back a couple months ago when that call came in and you and I were chatting. And I said, so what are you looking for? He said, well, I want to work maybe with a multinational and in communications. And it was very high level. How has your story changed since then, or gotten more focused? Or how do you tell your story today when you're out there looking?
Yeah, I think, Park, the narrative is so powerful, it's stuck. What it has really done for me is solidify how important it is that I get to work with a mission-driven company that truly embraces this philosophy, where I can be a partner in their efforts. So it really, when something is powerful, it sticks, and that's been the case for me.
What have you seen in your Rio Tinto career where you brought diverse thinking together within the organization, where you maybe even asked yourself, I'm not sure I can pull this one off. They're asking for the impossible because these two departments don't work well together, but maybe something you did, or how did you get them working together?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, when you are leading teams that are diverse, there are natural sort of attributes that everybody brings that are just different. And, Park, I was given a remit. It's not uncommon for a big business like that to restructure. And I was just leading the copper business. Then they gave me the diamonds portfolio and they said, here's a blank slate, build a team. And that is can be intimidating, because I knew that I was had people that were really good and that it might be a bit sort of scary to be part of this new organization. And I was able to sit with each of them and have this discussion about what they could bring and where they wanted to go and how they wanted to develop through this, this lens. And there were a few serious skeptics about the new model, let me tell you, and people who maybe thought that they should have been in a different role and in a different place. And I mean, everybody on that team just ended up thriving because we were able to find that sweet spot and let them really embrace their passions, whether it was to grow others or it was to get out into the field, whatever it was. But it's the way in which you work with people to mine that diversity of thinking and abilities that's really a game changer.
Do you feel like your dad had an impact on you in teaching you, growing up as a young girl, about how to deal with that, since he was superintendent of a high school?
Absolutely.
What is some of a takeaway or two from him?
Oh, look, he was a big proponent for social justice and equality, and he treated everybody in the educational food chain, the same. And whether they were the janitor or they were the assistant superintendent, and he just was incredibly impactful. I mean, one of the most powerful things I remember, Park, is there was a janitor. My dad worked late, and there was a janitor, and he was an immigrant, and he had cancer, and my father drove him. At the time, I, didn't understand it, but to Sloan Kettering for treatment, and very quietly and did this and helped him out financially, even, in the later years of his life. And his name was Nikki. And I remember Nikki, and I remember, that Nikki did a heck of a job taking care of that administrative building. And that was never lost on me, in terms of everybody deserves an opportunity to be their best self. And it's our job to help them do that. And that's the same philosophy I bring to parenting, to leadership, to everyday life.
Yeah. Now, have you ever told that story?
No.
Would you again?
Yes, with pride.
How come?
Park, I think it's this constant reflecting through this exercise. And you, Park, have an innate ability to ask these powerful questions that bring out these stories.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, and that was a loaded how come question because
tricky.
As the listener, I mean, what did you learn about Jennifer just then? You know, this background of social justice that she was raised in. What an amazing man her father was. So terrific role model. And you can see then how this plays out into her life in mid-career now, or getting not quite mid-career, nearing it.
Yeah, careful,
I know
Park.
it. I know it. I see you picking up your Starbucks, about ready to throw it at me. But you've had, 15 years as an international communicator. And by the way, Jennifer's CV shares all that.
Yes.
It gives the background and this wonderful, background she has, plus all of her education and her master's and all that sort of thing. And I think we learn more from Jennifer from the little stories that she told about what has informed and shaped who she is today as a communicator than that CV. And yet when we go looking for jobs, we park our brand story, our origin stories, our quest stories, and we lead with facts and data found in our resumes and our CVs. And my argument to that is for the kind of jobs that Jennifer's going after, and you are going after as a listener, if you're looking out there, high level, high power, you are going up against incredible competition, and perhaps their CVs are even better than yours. But the fact of the matter is that powerful CV is just the cost of entry. That's just gets you in the door. What closes the door on everybody else and keeps you inside is they want to know who they are hiring, what you're about. And you're only going to get that through the character that is illustrated through the stories and the experiences you've had as a kid, as a person, as a professional, and how you've dealt with that. And that's when you lead with that. I personally think it puts you way ahead of the competition.
Park, I couldn't agree more. You have made me a believer in personal branding. The CV is dead. Look, you have to have experience. You have to have it. You have to be able to show quantifiable success. And all of that you can do. And as you know, Park, on the website, we wrote some really strong case studies that show what I have done in communications and how I have led diverse teams. And those are the proof points. But it's what do you stand for? What are you about? What is the unique narrative that you own? And for those of us who spent a lot of time doing that for other people, and helping everyone else with a tagline, and then it comes down to doing it for ourselves, it's a bit daunting.
You become Dr. Vo.
You are Dr.
Your own teeth.
Don't do your own teeth. And absolutely. And it is powerful, and it is something you can stand by and believe in and be proud of. So I can't say enough about it, and would recommend everybody do it no matter where they are in their career, quite frankly.
Well, and it's fun. If you want to see Jennifer's story in action, go to the new website that she put together. And it wasn't that hard to put together. It was Squarespace. You found a beautiful template. We took some photos, some headshots of you here. Luis Medina, our creative, brilliant director.
Photog to the stars now.
Photog to the stars now. Check it out at jenniferrusso.me. Gennifer.
J. Yep.
J, what did I say? G?
It's
J.
all right, yeah.
J. All right. J.
JG. It's
I'll
all
give
the
you
same.
the J. Russo, RUSSO.me. And I love how it came together because we did it with such intent. So it's in 3 sections, folks. The first one is her story, her origin story. It doesn't get in to talk about all the wonderful things she does, but it explores who she is as a person and what makes her this kinetic communicator. So we're selling to the heart very much here,
Absolutely.
Right brain. And then we slide down and we get into her CV because you got to have that there. People want to know, okay, wow, she seems amazing. What has she done? So now we move over to the head, the left brain. We roll out all of that, and then we end it on those 3 wonderful case studies. And what I asked Jennifer to do is to go in. Oh, and we do have a few testimonials in there.
Of course.
So people, the social proof. But we asked Jennifer to say, can you go in and just write up 3 stories, actual human impact that you had a hand in at Rio Tinto or your other work that now underscores and illustrates and supports everything else within this page. How hard was that to do?
Park, it wasn't hard once we got rolling. And, it was applying the same, I think for me, it was about this notion of applying the same rigor that we do to other aspects of our life to defining who we are as we move forward in our career. I mean, this is something that is, going to affect the next many years of my life and others. And so this process is incredibly valuable and powerful and grounds you and helps you focus. And also is critical in helping ensure there's alignment when you're looking at organizations from a cultural perspective and organizational perspective. So yeah, I mean, the workbook, the whiteboarding, fleshing out the narrative, Park, every step built on the one before. And we landed on a product that just surprised me in the most wonderful way.
Well, it is you.
It's me.
And you did all the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
All we did is did a little guiding here and there and ask some questions. I always say when you get your brand story straight, whether it's an organizational company brand story or your personal brand story, you clarify your story, amplify your impact. So now people really understand who you are and what you're about, to get you and land you just that perfect job for the next 15 years of your life. Not even a job. It's that career step for you. And it ultimately simplifies your life because now you know the kinds of organizations you want to go
That's
to.
it.
You know who to say no to. It gets you super focused on what you're about. And doesn't it just feel more natural now? Like you're not fighting looking for a job?
Right. It becomes, it's almost like you're looking for the next passion project rather than the next job. And I think lots of people at this stage of their career that are at my career stage, dare I say mid-career part.
Well, just barely mid-career.
Are absolutely struggling with this. I've shared the exercise and effort that you and I went through and people are saying, man, I got to do this kind of virtual soul searching and get it on paper and get it out there about what I stand for. Because I've just, there's a little bit of career sleepwalking, Park, that happens sometimes. And if you don't take a step back to do this, you can't really define the way forward.
I wish they would do this for kids in high school. And not that they have to be completely, crystal clear on what their brand story is at this point, but just to start getting them thinking in a narrative fashion about their life because it's going to align
Absolutely.
better. It would probably speak to them more on what to take and what to study and what to explore in college. And as they do each one of those steps, their story will become clearer and clearer in their mind. And then when they get into the 20s, it's not like you have to land on that career. But that's the time to really explore. I think I like this and a little bit of that. And the alignment comes together more and more. And yet nobody talks about this stuff. They don't teach it. Nobody knows, I guess, how to teach it. I don't know. But it comes back to just becoming the author of your own story, understanding narrative. The hero's journey plays a big role in this. And to stop looking for your story and start finding your scenes, those moments that have shaped who you are today.
Absolutely, Park. And it was really just incredible and such a fun journey. And I'll let you know that I did share my story with my oldest son, who is 11. And he was part of that story in terms of the traveling that we do together, our annual trips. And
you go for bike rides and take them bike rides through
different cities in an effort to expose him to the diversity of the world and things that make us go. And, there's nothing tougher than a tougher crowd than a kid. And he was thoroughly impressed.
And did he feel like it summed up mom?
And he got it. Yeah. And he said, that's my mom.
That's awesome. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for being here. Any parting words for our listeners?
My parting words and maybe just a bit of advice that I wish I had taken, this project on earlier, quite frankly. When you're whether you are 10 years into your career or 20, it is worth it to take a step back and do an exercise like this. Honestly, it is incredibly valuable and grounding, and I have every confidence will propel me into Jennifer Russo 2.0.
That's awesome. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much.
Thanks,
I can't
Park.
wait to see what lucky organization has you as their kinetic communicator.
Thank you, Park, for helping me define that.
Absolutely. And thank you all for listening to this edition of The Business of Story. If you liked what you heard today and you feel like Jennifer's words and wisdom and experience can benefit someone else, feel free to share this episode with them. And if you've got questions about your own brand story, go to The Business of Story. I got a ton of free tools there you can download, or you can download the workbook, all of $45, the single best investment I believe you'll ever make in your career, and fill it out. And then certainly if I can be of service to you, reach out after the fact, send it to me, and we'll work it together. But in the meantime, make sure that you come back next week when we'll have another amazing story artist like Jennifer right here at Business of Story to help you craft and tell more compelling stories that sell. And until then, remember, the most important, potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks for listening.